you so much, Linda. And also, it's so great to see you all here today. And for those of you who came to our Good Friday walk, as well, your presence was appreciated. So good evening, everyone. We are glad to be able to gather on this difficult night as we delve into the painful narrative of Jesus' betrayal, imprisonment, and crucifixion. This night reminds us of Jesus' death so long ago, when God's love revealed for us appeared to have died. But we also are exposed to some uncomfortable truths regarding state-sanctioned violence in our age. Welcome to Seagrave United Church, a part of the Greenbank and Seagrave United Church Pastoral Charge. My name is Ian Wilgus, and I am the minister here, and I am honored to be able to journey with you this Holy Week. And as a reminder, we are being live streamed, so at one point, people will be invited to come up for a practice. So if you don't want to be on live stream, then you can participate from afar should you wish. And then even though we will be departing silently tonight, we are all asked to gather back on Easter Sunday, either for the sunrise service, which starts at 7 a.m., but we'll be actually meeting at 6:30, or for Easter Sunday at 10 a.m. And for those of you who are new here, I want to emphasize that we are an affirming ministry, which means that everybody is welcome in this place, no matter who you are, what you look like, where you live, what you do or do not believe, no matter what you have done and left undone, and no matter who you love, you are welcome here. And now I wish to acknowledge the land that we find ourselves on. And tonight, it felt appropriate to focus on the injustice that the land has faced, remembering that the cross that Jesus was crucified on was hammered into the ground, remembering that the earth too was part of the crucifixion. And when black men and women were lynched in the United States, it was trees that were forced to partake in the injustice. And we know that our earth home is also subject to injustice as our planet continues to burn and be commodified. So may we, in honor of our indigenous siblings who have been here for thousands of years, and especially the Anishinaabe people and the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nations, may we work for justice for this land so it may be sustained for 7 generations in the future. And I will now go down and light our Christ candle and our affirming candle. And you'll notice that even though we normally light 3 candles, I'm going to light 1 tonight for effect, and the affirm candle will stay lit throughout the entire service. These candles symbolize our faith in Jesus, the one who brings us together and the one who pushes us to draw our circles even wider and to challenge those in power, and our affirming candle, which signals our intention to welcome everybody, as I mentioned earlier. And now I invite Betty Lou to come up and do our first reading.
Good evening. The fallout from the Last Supper, Luke 22, verses 24 to 38. Another dispute arose among them about who would be regarded as the greatest. But Jesus said to them, "Earthly rulers domineer over their people, Those who exercise authority over them are called their benefactors. This must not happen with you. Let the greatest among you be like the youngest. Let the leader among you become the follower. For who is the greater, the one who reclines at a meal or the one who serves it? Isn't it the one reclining at the table? Yet here I am among you as the one who serves you. You are the ones who have stood by me faithfully in trials. Just as God has given me dominion, so I give it to you. In my reign, you will eat and drink at my table, and you'll sit on the thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Simon, Simon, Satan has demanded that you be sifted like wheat, but I've prayed for you, that your faith may not fail. You, in turn, must give strength to your sisters and brothers. Rabbi, Peter answered, with you I'm prepared to face imprisonment and even death. And Jesus responded, I tell you, Peter, before the rooster crows today, you'll have denied me 3 times that you know me. Jesus said to them, when I sent you off without purse, traveling bag, or sandals, were you in need of anything? No, nothing, they replied. He said, now, however, the one who has a purse had better carry it, the same with a traveling bag. And if they don't have a sword, they should sell their cloaks and buy one. For I tell you, what was written in Scripture must be fulfilled in me. The suffering servant was counted among criminals, for whatever refers to me must be fulfilled. And they said, look, Rabbi, here are 2 swords. And Jesus answered, that is enough. You take over now.
The first reading we just heard picks up exactly where we left off on Palm Sunday. Jesus had eaten with his friends, his beloveds. They share together the most intimate of moments, dining together in fellowship. But this is not an ordinary meal, this Last Supper. These final moments offer us a glimpse into the dynamics already at play. The disciples have begun arguing about who would betray Jesus and then who would be the best. Because of course then, when their leader is in danger, then everybody then wants to be the best. So we see very human elements already at play, especially as the uncertainty for the disciples is just beginning. And I'll admit, as I picture myself in this reading, I don't know where I would place myself, because I could see the temptation to deny, as Jesus says that Peter will do. If I was in danger and thought that there was a way out of that path of danger, I would probably want to deny that I knew Jesus. Jesus also promoted very oppositional, or as I call it, countercultural teachings, which means teachings that resist the dominant culture. And we can see him promoting that, and the disciples, well, struggling with that. They instead are falling back into the common Roman teachings. So we see that beginning already, and we know already what could happen based on this narrative alone. So I invite us all to stay in this place with the disciples, even though we know how the story ends now that it happened thousands of years ago. I invite us all to stay with the disciples in this moment and really think about how would you respond in these moments. And now I invite us all to our call together. We mark this day when Jesus, God's love revealed, was crucified, when it appeared that love had died and that violence had won, we sit and mourn a while. We mark this day when the state mocked Jesus, when his disciples did not wait with him and they denied him, and when the crowd chose to free Barabbas, and when Jesus was left to die. We sit and mourn a while. When we mark this day, we do not just mark an event over 2,000 years ago. We see the way that God is crucified this day, every day. We sit and mourn a while. I now invite Betty Lou to come and read our next reading.
The Garden of Gethsemane, Luke 22, verses 39 to 46. Then Jesus went out and made his way as usual to the Mount of Olives. The disciples accompanied him. When they reached the place, Jesus said to them, "Pray that you not be put to the test." Then Jesus withdrew about a stone's throw from them, knelt down and prayed. "Abba, if it's your will, take this cup from me. Yet not my will be yours, be done." When Jesus rose from prayer, he came to the disciples and found them sleeping, exhausted with grief. And he said to them, "Why do you sleep? Wake up and pray that you not be subjected to the trial."
I now invite Rita to come and sing our solo, Gethsemane, written by Sally DeFord.
Gethsemane lay still and dark. Creation watched in silent awe as Jesus suffered his Father's will to satisfy unyielding law. He knelt in earnest prayer alone. His friends o'ercome with sorrow slept. Beneath the burden of grief he groaned. Beneath the weight of sin he wept. And with his blood so freely spent, he bought my soul, he paid my debt. What work of love was wrought for me in the stillness of Gethsemane. This bitter cup wilt thou remove, but not my will, but thine be done. Behold his anguish and weep anew for love of Christ, the sinless one. With his wounds my own are healed, my every my shame, my weakness, my grief untold, find ransom in his priceless gift. For with his blood so freely given, he bought my soul, he paid my debt. What work of love was wrought for me in the stillness of Gethsemane? In the stillness of Gethsemane.
I'm going to invite us now into a brief contemplative practice, which I feel really allows us to sink into the moments of Good Friday. So today we will be trying a practice called sacred imagination. In the practice of sacred imagination, we are invited to place ourselves within a text. Imagine your surroundings. What person would you be? What would you feel, see, hear? What would you notice that you don't when you just hear the text? So I will read a small excerpt for the text, and then I invite us each to spend a moment visualizing ourselves within the story. When Jesus rose from prayer, he came to the disciples and found them sleeping, exhausted with grief. He said to them, "Why do you sleep? Wake up and pray that you not be subjected to the trial." And when we're done, I'll make a sound with the singing bowl to bring us out of the practice. We will now sing our first hymn, "Come, O Come and Mourn with Me a While," which, if you're using your hymn books, is in Voices United 136, or will be on your screen as always.
Come together.
betrayal. Luke 22, verses 47 to 53. While Jesus was still speaking, a crowd suddenly appeared with Judas, one of the 12, at their head. And Judas came over to Jesus to embrace him. But Jesus said, "Judas, are you betraying the chosen one with a kiss?" Those who were around Jesus, realizing what was going to happen, said, "Rabbi, should we strike them with our swords?" One of them struck the attendant of the high priest, cutting off an ear. But Jesus said, "Stop, no more." Then Jesus touched the attendant's ear and healed it. But to those who had come out against him, the chief priests, the chiefs of the temple guard, and the elders, Jesus said, "Why do you come out with swords and clubs as if I were a robber? I was with you in the temple every day, and you could have laid hands on me anytime you wanted. But this is your hour, the triumph of darkness."
Please join your hearts with mine in our opening prayer. O most holy and gracious God, with our bodies and spirits grounded in your Spirit and our loving hearts reaching out to you, we are your hopeful Good Friday people. We are called to action. The time to be counted is now. Be present and protest what matters. Yes, be counted. Vote for radical change, for justice, action against the killing of Indigenous women and girls, for fairness, real substantial outcomes and changes in institutions and law, for peace, safety for the children of Palestine and Israel and Russia and Ukraine, and for children everywhere, for creation. The permafrost is melting and endangering northern animals. For life, our carbon footprint is too great. O most holy and gracious God, we have hope for our future because we are your Good Friday people. We know we are in good hands with you, O God, as our guide. Amen. The betrayal scene can be befuddling, to say the least. In many ways, Judas responds exactly as we expected. The attendants respond exactly as expected. Even the disciples respond exactly as we expected them to. Jesus, though, his response confounds us. Even though he is being betrayed and he knows that something bad is going to happen, he does not lash out. He does not even try to defend himself. Instead, he merely asks Judas a question. And then when his disciples try to attack the attendants, which in all honesty, I think I probably would have joined in had I been in that scenario. But Jesus then tells them to stop. And not only that, he offers healing to the attendant. Now, as I've mentioned before, healing within the New Testament is not related to a literal healing, so to speak, but is instead a way to reconcile in community. So what Jesus is doing is then helping one of the people that's trying to arrest him and reconciling him in community, which is pretty baffling, right? Well, I think this points to something about Jesus. The author of Luke is reminding us yet again of how countercultural Jesus is, how different he is to the ways of most people. And it offers us the challenge to respond with love and gentleness in the face of injustice. it doesn't say to just roll over and accept it. Jesus didn't do that either. He did challenge the people that were trying to betray him. So I think that this calls us to action, because as we try to follow Jesus, as we are all trying to do in this space, we are called to respond in the name of love. We are called to respond to injustice with love. And may you consider that as we continue to go down the Good Friday story. And we will now sing our next hymn, which is in Voices United, 132, or on your screen, Bitter Was the Night.
The arrest and denial. Luke 22, verses 54 to 71. They arrested Jesus and led him away. And arriving at the house of the high priest, Peter followed at a distance and sat down in the midst of those who had kindled a fire in the courtyard and were sitting around it. And one of the high priest's attendants saw him sitting there at the fire, and she stared at him and said, "This one was with Jesus too." But Peter denied it. "I don't know him," he said. And a little later, someone else noticed Peter and remarked, "You're one of them too." But Peter said, "No, I'm not." About an hour later, someone else insisted, "Surely this fellow was with them too. He even talks like a Galilean." "I don't even know what you're talking about," Peter said. Just then, as Peter was still speaking, a rooster crowed. Jesus turned and looked at Peter. Then Peter remembered Jesus saying, "Before a rooster crows today, you'll deny me 3 times." Peter went out and he wept bitterly. Meanwhile, those who held Jesus in custody were amusing themselves at his expense. They blindfolded and slapped him and taunted him. "Play the prophet. Which one struck you?" And they mocked. And they hurled many other insults at him. And at daybreak, the Sanhedrin, which was made up of elders of the people, the chief priests, and the religious scholars, assembled again. Once they had brought Jesus before the council, they said, "Tell us, are you the Messiah?" And Jesus replied, "If I tell you, you'll not believe me. And if I question you, He won't answer. But from now on, the chosen one will have a seat at the right hand of the power of God. Then all of them said, "So you are God's own." Jesus answered, "Your own words have said it. What need do we have of witnesses?" They said, "We have heard it from his own mouth."
My feelings on this part of the Good Friday story are conflicted. On one hand, I absolutely love Jesus' cheek. He's rather, cheeky with the people that are questioning him, not answering their questions or giving them smart answers. But on the other hand, this is probably the section of the text that makes me the most uncomfortable, because I do not know how I would have responded in this situation. I don't know if I would have stood up and admitted that I knew Jesus, or if I had been one of the soldiers. I don't know if I would have just been a bystander. It reminds me of the books that we were taught about in elementary school, one of which was called The Bullied, the Bully, and the Bystander, which argued that really there are no such things as bystanders, that everybody needs to either stand up to the bully or they become part of the problem themselves. And I think that's what is happening here. But I also find tremendous empathy with the people who are denying Jesus. Peter is really afraid. I think of the students who have been protesting in favor of the Palestinian people at universities. Regardless of how you feel about their cause and whether or not you agree with them, I think we can acknowledge that it is incredibly courageous, their work. And yet, I'm sure that there are times that they have faced obstacles when campus police came along, or even in the United States threatening to deport people for protesting. And I just admire so much the ones who had the courage to admit, yes, I was there. I was part of what they were doing. I believe in it. But I also know why the people who don't do that behave that way. So this text really makes me think a lot about my responses, especially as we re-examine German history and consider the role that everyday German people had in Hitler's rise to power. They might not have been directly responsible, but they also didn't protest. They turned a blind eye. And this text offers us both a sense of empathy for the people, but also a challenge. It asks us to consider how we would have responded. It asks us to consider, what would we do? Would we stand up for love? Or would we maybe take an action that will save ourselves, but might be to the detriment of society? Again, I'm not judging for whichever pathway you may discover that you would have taken. I truly do not know where I would have taken that action, but it offers us a thought. And especially in the text where Jesus is mocked, because I'm sure that not all the soldiers wanted to be part of the mocking of Jesus, yet they also did not say anything to those who were doing the mocking. So I think it gives us something all to think about. And again, I don't want to offer any easy answers, nor do I want to judge. Just it's something for us all to think about. And now I invite Betty Lou to continue reading our story.
Pilate questions Jesus, Luke 23, verses 1 to 12. Then the whole assembly arose and led Jesus to Pilate. And they began to accuse Jesus by saying, "We found this one subverting our nation, opposing the payment of taxes to Caesar, and even claiming to be a Messiah, a king." Then Pilate questioned Jesus, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Well, you have said it," Jesus answered. Then Pilate reported to the chief priests and the crowds, "I find no guilt in him." But they insisted. "He stirs up the people wherever he teaches through the whole of Judea, from Galilee to Jerusalem." On hearing this, Pilate asked whether Jesus was a Galilean. And learning that Jesus was from Herod's jurisdiction, they sent Jesus off to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at this time. Now, at the sight of Jesus, Herod was very pleased. From the reports he had heard about Jesus, he'd wanted for a long time to see him, and Herod hoped to see Jesus perform some miracle. Herod questioned him at great length, but Jesus wouldn't answer. The chief priests and religious scholars stood there, accusing Jesus vehemently. So Herod and the soldiers treated Jesus with contempt and ridicule, put a magnificent robe upon him, and sent him back to Pilate. Herod and Pilate, who had previously been set against each other, became friends that day.
We'll be giving another contemplative practice in a moment, so I will keep this reflection very brief. But I think that this part of the story really begins to highlight the way that the powers that be were trying to silence Jesus. This makes it clear that it is not just a certain group of people that are responsible for Jesus' crucifixion. I know many in the past have blamed Jewish people for Jesus' crucifixion, but that is so not accurate. There might have been leaders that did want Jesus crucified, but they certainly would not have been able to do it without other elements of the state that conspired against Jesus. So we really see the way that this was the state and power trying to silence Jesus, trying to silence his teachings of love. And it serves as a call to action to us to think about who in our society are being silenced, who might be offering us beacons of love that we cannot see because of those in power. And now, I'm sure you've all been wondering about what these pieces of paper that I gave out for. I do have one extra, so I can give it to somebody. But these pictures all have indigenous representations of the cross. So I want us for a few moments, I promise it won't be a long practice, but I invite you to engage in a practice together where you just look at the images and think about what it's trying to say to you. Which image draws something to you, and what do you feel it is trying to say to you? And that if you want, you can share it with me afterwards, where should you feel like it, or you can keep your thoughts private as well. Either way is fine, and then I will ring the singing bowl one more time to bring us out of the practice. now invite Betty Lou to come up and continue our story.
Crowd demands crucifixion. Luke 23, verses 13 to 25. Pilate then called together the chief priests, the ruling class, and the people, and said to them, "You have brought this person before me as someone who incites people to rebellion. I have examined him in your presence and have found no basis for any charge against him arising from your allegations. Neither has Herod. For Jesus has been sent back to us. Obviously, he has done nothing to deserve death. Therefore, I will punish Jesus, but then I'll release him." Pilate was obligated to release one prisoner to the people at festival time, and the whole crowd cried out as one, "Take him away. We want Barabbas." Barabbas had been imprisoned for starting a riot in the city and for murder. Pilate wanted to release Jesus, so he addressed them again, but they shouted back, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Yet a third time, Pilate spoke to the crowd, "What wrong has this Jesus done? I found nothing that calls for death. Therefore, I'll have him flogged, and then I'll release him." But they demanded that Jesus be crucified, and their shouts increased in volume. Pilate decided that their demands should be met. So he released Barabbas, the one who had been imprisoned for rioting and murder, and Jesus was handed over to the crowd.
We will now sing our next hymn, "When the Son of God Was Dying," which is in Voices United 153 or on your screen. This section of the Good Friday text is incredibly chilling. Pilate had seen nothing that he could charge Jesus with. He wanted to give Jesus a basic punishment and release him. But the powerful would not stand for this. They were deeply afraid of Jesus and his followers. They believed that they needed to kill the movement. And then a mob begins to form. A seed was planted from those in power, a seed of disinformation, and a seed that grew to anger and then to outrage. So much that the crowd yelled out, "Crucify! Crucify!" for the one that brought love. The crowd was so outraged, so caught up in being part of a mob, that they chose to release Barabbas, a criminal, instead of the one that promised to bring love into the world and create a sustainable society that allowed all to flourish. The crowd chose Barabbas. A crowd formed that was so angry that it stormed the Capitol on January 6th, or blasted horns in Ottawa, or protested outside Planned Parenthood, or ones that demanded that trans women should no longer be considered women, or a crowd that wants to prevent a homeless shelter from forming behind their backyards. This story highlights the development of mob mentality. It shows us how good people can be caught up in the thrill of the crowd. At one point, they had even shouted, "Hosanna!" And then it turned quickly. And the story warns how reason can be left behind in the place of chance, and where everyone is able to rile one another up. I think this text also serves as a call to action, to consider if the crowds that we are part of are considering the perspectives of those that are marginalized, and to ensure that we are monitoring our own feelings and emotions to ensure that we continue to reflect God's love and embody goodness, even if we are part of a big crowd, or maybe especially when we are in a big crowd. I now invite Betty Lou to continue the story.
Jesus carries the cross and is crucified. Luke 23, verses 26 to 43. As they led Jesus away, they seized Simon, a Cyrene, who was just coming in from the fields, and forced him to carry the cross behind Jesus. A large crowd was following, many of them women who were beating their breasts and wailing for him. And at one point, Jesus turned to these women and said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, don't weep for me. Weep rather for yourselves and for your children. The time is coming when it will be said, 'Blessed are the childless, the wombs that have never given birth, and the breasts that have never nursed.' Then people will say to the mountains, 'Fall on us,' and to the hills, 'Cover us up.' For they do these things when the wood is green. What will happen when it's dry?" 2 others were also led off with Jesus, criminals who were to be put to death. When they had reached the place called the Skull, they crucified Jesus there, together with the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. And Jesus said, "Abba, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing." Then they divided his garments, rolling dice for them, and the people stood there watching. The rulers, however, jeered him and said, "He saved others, let him save himself. If he really is the Messiah of God, the chosen one." The soldiers also mocked him. They served Jesus sour wine and said, "If you're really the King of the Jews, save yourself." There was an inscription above Jesus that read, "This is the King of the Jews." And one of the criminals who hung there beside him insulted Jesus too, saying, "Are you really the Messiah? then save yourself and us." But the other answered the first with a rebuke. "Don't you even fear God? We're only paying the price for what we've done, but this one has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your glory." And Jesus replied, "The truth is, today you will be with me in paradise."
There are a lot of powerful images in this passage. This seems to be the culmination of everything we have heard in Holy Week. But even in the midst of pain and tremendous suffering, Jesus still ministered to those around him. He was still able to see the humanity in others, and he was still able to open his heart. And in perhaps the most confounding moment so far, Jesus asks God to forgive those who had crucified him, saying, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." This to me is baffling. It shows such a remarkable strength of character. But I don't think that the text is trying to make people feel bad. I think instead it is offering us a glimpse into God, because Jesus is God's love revealed. So I think this is offering us a glimpse into the forgiveness that is possible and that we will all receive from God, no matter how much we make a mistake, no matter how seismic our impact is, we are still held in love. And we also have to face the reality that this passage is a blistering account of state-sanctioned violence. And we still have to face that those in power still commit violence. We are not just remembering something that happened 2,000 years ago. Good Friday happens every day. God is dying every day at the hands of those in power. In his provocative book, The Cross and the Lynching Tree, James Cone points out the powerful link between Jesus' crucifixion and the experiences of black people being hung on the lynching tree. And therefore, Cone explains, if God was with Jesus as he was crucified, then it must mean that God is with black men as they were lynched. And for Cone, the experience of Jesus on the cross signals that God was and is with all those who suffer violence from the state and those in power. Just as Jesus did, George Floyd was crucified. God was killed that day at the hands of the state. God, who is revealed with us, called out for his mama as he couldn't breathe under the knee of the state. Victor Perez, a boy with autism and cerebral palsy in the United States, was crucified simply because police could not recognize the signs that he had autism. And Indigenous women in Canada are still being crucified, having their children taken away, their water poisoned with mercury, their disappearances dismissed, and their rights to land ignored. So if God's love is with those that are being crucified, how are we called to be active in the world? How does this change our view of injustice? Does it make injustice intolerable? Does it call each of us to take action to protect those who are vulnerable? And now please join me in our prayer of self-reflection, which is in unison. God, our society still crucifying your love, those who are vulnerable and challenge social norms, those to try to speak truth to those in power. It can be so much easier for us to look away, to not bear witness to suffering and injustice. It can be much easier to ignore injustice. May we feel your presence as we reflect on how we can resist social and physical violence in our lives and society. But God, your love revealed was crucified today, and yet Jesus pleaded with God to forgive those who crucified. So may we each take that knowledge that God loves us and does not judge us no matter what. May we take comfort in that, and may we extend that forgiveness to others. We will now sing our next hymn, Were You There?, which is in Voices United 144 and on your screen. So we're going to be engaging in another practice. So I will be inviting each of us to come to the cross, take a nail from me, and then lay it in the offering plate as we consider the times that maybe we have denied the teachings of love or were complicit in injustice. or how we benefit injustice. And I invite us each to also consider, as we place a nail down, how we can remove the nails of injustice. And again, if you can only come up if you feel beckoned to do so. If you would rather stay seated, that is fine as well. I just want you to feel comfortable doing this however you wish.
Jesus' death, Luke 23, verses 44 to 46. It was about noon, and darkness fell on the whole land until 3 in the afternoon because of an eclipse of the sun. Then the curtain in the sanctuary was torn in two, and Jesus uttered a loud cry and said, "Abba, into your hands I commit my spirit." Saying this, Jesus breathed for the last time.
We will now sing the chant, "Jesus, Remember Me," which is in Voices United 148, where will be on your screen, and we will sing it a total of 3 times. Please stay seated for this one. Everybody
Jesus' burial, Luke 23, verses 47 to 53. The centurion who saw this glorified God, saying, "Surely this one was innocent." When the crowds that had gathered for the spectacle saw what had happened, they returned home, beating their breasts and weeping. All the acquaintances of Jesus and the women who had come with him from Galilee stood at a distance, looking on. There was a member of the Sanhedrin named Joseph, who had not consented to their action. And Joseph was from Arimathea and lived in anticipation of the reign of God. He approached Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Joseph took the body down, wrapped it in fine linen, and laid it in a tomb cut out of rock, where no one had yet been laid.
First off, I'd like to thank Betty Lou for all of her readings. I know I put her through her paces today. Some people in my family have a saying: when there has been a passionate debate and one party realizes that the other is in fact correct, they'll say, "I hate it when you make sense." That is likely how the crowd felt that day, when they realized that they had been wrong about Jesus, that Jesus had, in fact, been God's love embodied, as they realized that they had been tricked by disinformation of the state. And yet, even though this story is one of sorrow, the story ends with a moment of goodness. Even in the midst of utter despair, a ray of goodness still shines through. In this case, it comes in the form of Joseph, who is, I do not believe, considered to be one of the disciples. Yet it was Joseph who had courageously asked Pilate if he could have Jesus' bodies, and then, with such dignity and respect, wrapped Jesus' body and built him a tomb. And based on rock carving, I'm sure that was a lot of work for Joseph, which really speaks to this ray of goodness. So even though Jesus had been mocked and crucified in a brutal way, goodness still shined through in the form of Joseph, giving Jesus one last moment of dignity. And then we are invited to consider from this part of the story where flickers of goodness can be found in moments of despair, and where we can offer goodness to others. Please join your hearts with mine in our final prayer of lament before we listen to our departing choir anthem. Loving God, as we face the uncertainty of this day and age, we ask for your presence. Like Jesus' disciples, we are afraid in this time. We feel sorrow at the conflicts raging around the world. We mourn the way that our earth home has been commodified. We mourn the impact of climate change on the most vulnerable. May we feel your presence this night as we continue to lament, as we sit in this state of mourning for what has been lost and the shattering of dreams, not knowing what will come next. God, may you stay with us in the midst of our suffering this night and every night. Amen.